I can remember growing up when my mother said nothing good happens after midnight.
3 high school students are left injured after a wild shootout in a parking lot following high school prom, and the sheriff has a lot to say about it. We are digging into the search for suspects and the incredibly dangerous situation that could have had deadly consequences. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So we're coming up on the end of another school year, season filled with lots of major events in a high schooler's life, like final exams, college applications, graduation, and of course there's prom. Prom's supposed to be a great time. For many, it's a highlight you look back on. However, for 3 teens, prom season, sadly, will probably be something they never forget, but not for a good reason. You see, they happened to be sitting in a car outside of an alleged prom after party when shots rang out across the parking lot. They got hurt. Now, law enforcement's trying to track down at least 2, possibly 3 shooters. This happened late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, May 3rd to May 4th in Davenport, Florida. A little bit of geography to go over here. So according to the Polk County Sheriff's Office, you have 2 high schools in Orange County, had their proms that weekend. The sheriff says deputies in nearby Osceola County had broken up a massive prom after party at a short-term rental property, and it's believed that some of the partygoers then went over to Davenport and Polk County to another short-term rental, this one in a condo complex. But what was supposed to be a celebration, fun, it turned into a nightmare when the sheriff says multiple people opened fire in the parking lot of that complex. 3 high school students who were all sitting in a car together. They were grazed by gunfire. Now, fortunately, they all survived. At least one, though, has very serious injuries to his eye. Now, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, who we know very well here on this program, told reporters that 3 victims all went to Osceola High School, which did not have prom that night, by the way. The prom was apparently back in April. But he said it's unclear if they were there for the party or for some other reason, but the investigation's ongoing. Law enforcement's on the hunt for the shooters. But you had ring camera video from one of the condos that actually shows the moment those gunmen opened fire. That is just terrifying. You hear the gunshots, you see all the young people running away. So to talk about the evidence, what the sheriff had to say about the whole situation, when we're talking about Grady Judd, you know he's going to have a lot to say. I want to bring in Florida criminal defense attorney Kaysia Earley. Kaysia, so good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. Really scary situation.
It is. Just looking at the doorbell footage, you can see that these children, mostly innocent, minding their own business, and then you have these 2 suspects, or maybe 3, that just open fire recklessly in a crowd of teenagers. So this is very concerning, and that's exactly what Sheriff Judd was frustrated about, because he said that with all of these teenagers, not one person gave up a name. So this is definitely concerning.
You know, I was going to ask you about that. When you have shootings like this, events like this in a public area, you would think, oh my gosh, you have so many eyewitnesses to the crime. But then again, given the circumstances, given the trauma of it, given everybody running away, it might be difficult to know who saw what. And let alone, if people do know what happened, they might not be so forthcoming to come forward. It might be hard to identify who was actually there.
Of course, there's a lot of factors to take into play, right? Just as you stated, when you have a crowd of people, and oftentimes when you hear gunshots, you don't stand around and try to see where it's coming from. You're trying to leave and get to safety. So that's one factor to take into consideration. But you also have the fact that these are teenagers. Most likely the shooters are known to the teenagers, and they're afraid to snitch or tell or even get involved. And this is where parents are imperative. Speak to your children, especially if you knew where they were. I mean, of course you should. Every parent should know where their child is, because nothing good happens after midnight or even that late. You should be inside no matter what the situation is.
By the way, it's really funny. My producer, Savannah, said the same thing. She said her father said the same thing to her, that nothing good ever happens after midnight. So seems like a common thought on that. By the way, totally off topic, but very, very important. Did you know that high blood pressure is the #1 risk factor for mortality? Yeah, 1 in 2 adults have it. Many don't even realize they're at risk. It is a silent killer lurking unnoticed until unfortunately it's too late. Here's the good news though. You don't have to rely on Big Pharma to manage it. 120 Life is a blend of great tasting superfruit juices that's been shown to actually help lower blood pressure. It's trusted by hundreds of doctors, thousands of people who have seen real results. It's trackable too. Use a simple blood pressure monitor to see the changes yourself, plus completely risk-free. If you don't see lower numbers in 2 weeks, you get your money back. In a world where every second counts, don't let high blood pressure be the threat that you never saw coming. Take control today. Visit 120life.com/sidebar. Use code sidebar or scan the QR code on screen to save 15%. Now let's talk about Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd. Okay, he's been the sheriff there for 20 years, since 2005. This is a guy who is very unique. Love hearing his press conferences. He is known to be very straightforward, no nonsense, sometimes has this brutal approach when he talks about suspects and their alleged crimes. He holds nothing back. This situation, no different.
3 children, 3 teenagers were shot. And 3 teenagers, 3 children should not have been shot, but they were. And this investigation is still underway. We're in the preliminary phases of this investigation, and make no mistake about it, they made a horrible mistake when they crossed into Polk County, because we are going to do a detailed investigation of every phase of this event and hold everyone accountable that has violated the law.
Now, Sheriff Judd walked reporters through what his investigators know so far based on the 911 phone calls and the evidence found at the scene.
Let's start so you can understand. The first video we're going to show you was at the Wawa, and we received a call about 2:14 in the morning, and they said there's a mob outside.
By the way, Kaysia, why is it so important to hold these pressers? And we're going to play more of it, but why is it so important to hold these pressers?
It's very important because oftentimes the people that are not at the scene, they probably hear something, like they like to say, the streets are talking. So this is a call for the community to come forward with any information that you may have to assist the investigation. So these press conferences are very important because at this point in their initial investigation, there were no names, there were no leads. But when you're having these press conferences, there's oftentimes anonymous tips and additional information that they can build upon to hopefully lead to capturing the suspects.
Now, again, we're laying out the context of how all this happened because it's important to understand the timeline here. So according to the person who called dispatch, these teenagers were apparently causing a disturbance, blocking cars in the parking lot, fighting, stealing drinks from the coolers inside of a store. So deputies headed that way. And over the next few minutes, surveillance footage from the Wawa shows people clearing out just before deputies get there. Now, Sheriff Judd pointed out that they could likely hear sirens in the distance and took off. He also noted that investigators are not sure that any fights actually happened at the gas station, none were seen on the surveillance, or if people were just being unruly. But just steps away from the Wawa is the condo complex, where it's believed some sort of after-prom party was happening in a short-term rental. And soon after the call about the crowd at the gas station, 911 started getting calls about loud music and a party, and this was around 2:45 a.m. At this point, the deputies had left the Wawa to go to other calls of service, according to the sheriff. But then, about an hour later, they get a call about an active shooter.
The first shots we heard sounded like they came from a smaller handgun, and then you heard the loud reports, and that came from the 223. When we did our follow-up investigation, there were a total of 36 shell casings. 33 shell casings and 3 firearms. There were 380, 9mm, and a 223. So there were apparently 3 shooting groups that participated. I want to underscore that the 3 juveniles, the 3 teenagers, the 3 high school kids that were shot had no criminal record, were not troublemakers. They were just where they shouldn't have been after midnight.
Wrong place, wrong time. Kaysia, talk to us about what you take away from that evidence that was collected, because it does tell a piece of the story, doesn't it?
It does. It's so many problems that I see. First and foremost, parents, do you know where your children are? And if you do, shame on you. The fact that they were out 2 o'clock in the morning, let's just pause right there. You know, you have these teenagers, these juveniles that are out way past midnight, and there's calls that they're being rowdy, they're in a group. No matter what the case is, this could have been alleviated had the parents had their children inside. And then there's a greater concern. You have juveniles and guns, and there's a variety of guns, and then bullets, the recklessness of these shooters shooting in a space where there's a bunch of people. And then you have the alleged victims in this case who had no connection. And just like the sheriff said, wrong place, definitely the wrong time. Although they weren't doing anything illegal, the fact that you were out amongst this crowd, most of the people you probably did not know. And this is the issue. And I really believe that parents should be held accountable for their children if they don't know their whereabouts. We are responsible. We are the nurturers. And this is how we can alleviate some of these problems if you know where your children are.
That's a fair assessment, very fair assessment, and I believe Sheriff Judd had kind of said the same thing. And we're going to play a little bit more of what he had to say. But when you think about those weapons, do investigators now try to see where were those weapons obtained? Are they illegal weapons? Were they obtained on the black market? Were they sold? If you talk about 3 firearms, is 3 shooters, or is one of the shooters have multiple weapons? I mean, these are the questions that I'm curious about. Do you think that that's what's happening behind the scenes?
Of course. I mean, when you think of 3 firearms, there's a great likelihood that there were 3 separate shooters. There could be a possibility that you had one shooter with 2 firearms, but bottom line, I know they're going to, these shell casings are very important. This is where they can extract evidence. And oftentimes you can either gain DNA, fingerprints, or you can match the shell casings from this incident to possibly another incident where you have more evidence and then put it together. This is how investigations are conducted. You gather all of the information, hope that you get some tips from the community, some witnesses to come forward, and then build your case to present to the state attorney's office for formal charges. So I'm certain that this sheriff is first and foremost not playing with these suspects, and they're going to do a thorough investigation, and the clues that were left behind will assist in getting these assailants.
So Sheriff Judd, he gives updates on these 3 victims. Okay, so 2 males, a female. Again, says they're not involved in whatever disturbance was going on, was instead, again, apparently in the wrong place at the wrong time. Take a listen.
Our first victim I'm going to speak of is an African-American female, 17. She's in high school. She had a graze on her right shoulder and a separate graze on her forehead. It's just the grace of God that she's not dead today. Our second victim, who is an African-American male, 17, a teenager, a high school kid, had shrapnel in one of his eyes. And at this point, we don't know if he'll ever regain vision in his eye. He may be blind in that eye from shrapnel. The third person is described as a Middle Eastern male. He's 18, and he had a slight graze on his forehead. That's his story. I've seen pimples that look worse, but there is a slight mark on his forehead.
So, okay, he's hilarious. Anyway, Kaysia, the thing about it is they're lucky to be alive. And I also wonder, we'll talk about potential charges in a second if they make arrests here, but you also wonder the direction of the shots may be important as well, right? How do investigators, how do attorneys process that information in terms of the direction of the shots in order to tie it back to, the 3 firearms and potentially the 3 suspects?
Well, just like we have the footage from the ring camera, if we know the direction of the shots, then most likely the investigators will go door by door to see if any other surveillance footage captured this incident. We don't know if there were any cell phone footage prior to the shooting where we can identify the suspects either pulling out the weapon or arguing right before the shootout. So, knowing the direction of the shooters will help in securing additional evidence, whether it's the make and model of a vehicle or additional shell casings that could have possibly been overlooked. But this is definitely important in securing as much information and evidence and collection that you can in order to build a solid case against these suspects.
Do they go through the videos and try to identify every single person to have a follow-up interview with them?
I'm pretty sure they do, and Sheriff Judd is not making sure he's crossing all T's and dotting all I's. You heard what he said. They messed up when they entered into Polk County because he takes this very serious. And just as he stated, it's but for the grace of God that that bullet grazed her forehead and not entered, and it could have been a tragedy. And now you have a murder on your hands. So I know that he wants to prevent tragedies like this. And the only way to do that is to enforce the law and thoroughly investigate cases like this. Keep the pressure on the community to talk, to come forward. If you saw something, say something, and know that you speaking up can also save someone else in the future. Because if these suspects were so bold to shoot in a crowd before, most likely they did it before and they'll do it again. So it's only a matter of time. So please, if you see something, say something, assist them in the investigation to save a life.
That's a good point. And while the hunt is on for these shooters, Sheriff Judd does have a question for parents in his county.
Where were your kids at 2:15, at 3:38 in the morning? These are high school kids. The second question I have is, why is it that there's over 100 people here and nobody knows anything? Nobody knows anything. I want you to think about that for a minute. I suppose 100 of them were in the bathroom and the other 25 just arrived after the event was over. That's all I can figure.
I mean, it's a big problem, Kaysia. It's a big problem. You wonder if it's going to be a difficult investigation, but they're going to be dedicating, I think, full resources to try to come to a conclusion about this. The longer the time elapses, though, the more problematic it is for the sheriff's office, though.
Of course, because as time goes by, some of the witnesses who actually saw something, they may be more reluctant not to go forward or not to say what they saw. And, I agree with the sheriff because I have teenagers and they're in the house by 9:30 if they're not working. Because why are you out so late? Even beyond 10 o'clock, why are you out? You are a young child, you are a minor, you are a juvenile, and there's nowhere that's important other than being in the home, getting your rest, and going back to school and getting your education. So again, I fault the parents. And there needs to be some a form of punishment if these parents are enabling their children to be these criminals or committing these crimes. And it's unfortunate, but I really hope that the parents will talk to their children and encourage them to come forward and move beyond their fear so that they can help solve this crime.
And I'll tell you, Sheriff Judd's frustration with that lack of information was quite evident during his news conference. Take a look.
But the people shooting didn't know or they didn't care whenever they fled. And that's why I'm so angry that nobody knows anything, but your friends over here are shot. And nobody knows anything. Well, we're going to figure it out. We're early into the investigation and we're having to get our investigative leads from the videos because no one saw anything. How healthy is that? How smart is that? You're going to let these people not be held accountable so they can go shoot at someone else? What are you thinking? How out of control is that? They will shoot again, and they may have shot before if nobody's telling on them. if nobody's helping us identify them, if nobody's calling Crime Stoppers and staying anonymous, they don't care about your life. They just shot through a parking lot with 100 kids in it. You need to know where your children are, and they need to be home by midnight. They don't need to be carousing around at 2, 2:15, 2:30, 3, 3:30 to be shot at. So my first message is to parents, start being parents. When the prom's over, tell the kids to come home. If they want to have friends over, have them at your house where you can supervise and know where they are. That's how you have safe and healthy children that are alive and don't have bullet holes in them.
He makes a good point, and you have to wonder here, A, why aren't people coming forward? And B, from a legal point of view, can people who don't provide information to law enforcement be prosecuted? Have they committed a crime? Are they obstructing in any way? Or providing maybe false statements to law enforcement?
Well, false statements, yes, because you're committing perjury, because the statements that you give obviously are under oath. But there's really no duty to provide information from a civilian, right? It's just really morally right if you see something, assist in an investigation. But he gave options. He said that you can give information anonymously. So if you're truly afraid, but you have information to solve a crime, they have that outlet, and I can sense his frustration. I remember 25 years ago, when I went to my prom, I wanted to go to IHOP afterwards, and I couldn't go. And I was very upset. It was innocent. I just wanted to go eat. But just looking at this, sometimes what's innocent behavior, it oftentimes takes a parent who has that discerning spirit, who has that wisdom and knowledge to say, you know what? I know you're going to go to IHOP, but I don't trust everyone else around you. So I want to keep you safe. So, am I grateful that I didn't go now? Yes, in retrospect. So this is what he's saying to the parents. Be a parent. Learn how to say no, because if not, things like this will happen. So hopefully that message has been clear to the parents of these children that were out, so that we can help solve this crime and prevent future crimes.
Is IHOP where the party's at the after party? Is that where people go? Yeah, well,
of course, they don't have good food at prom.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. It's actually smart. I would encourage. It's actually a good idea. IHOP afterwards, instead of going to some, apparently abandoned or some short-term rental property. By the way, okay. So let me ask you this. Final point. If they arrest these individuals, and hopefully they arrest these individuals who are accused of doing this, what are the charges they're facing? Attempted murder, reckless endangerment, weapons charges, assault, battery? What are we looking at exactly here?
Yeah, it depends. First and foremost, it would depend on the record of the person, the age of the person, because even though it's a juvenile, the state of Florida can direct file that juvenile to adult court. So now you're looking at a greater punishment, because juvenile court is meant to rehabilitate, adult court is meant to punish. So that's the first hurdle. Then you're looking at whether or not that defendant had a previous record. So for example, if that defendant was a previous convicted felon, you're looking at a felon in possession of a firearm, which is a third-degree felony. And you're looking at a reckless endangerment, because of course it was a reckless activity to open fire in a crowd filled with people. You're looking at weapons charges, possibly attempted murder, or depending on the severity of the injuries, could it be downfiled? It all depends on the evidence collected and the history of the defendant upon his arrest. So you're definitely looking at some serious charges, and you're looking at a maximum prison sentence.
Kaysia Earley, thank you so much to come on, talk about this case. We're wishing nothing but a successful recovery for all three of the victims in this case. And you and I will now head to IHOP. I hear they have a fantastic special on the weekend. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten yet. Now I'm thinking about this, and that's where I'm left with. But Kaysia Earley, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.